All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Adam, and I'll be your moderator. Before we begin, just a few things to note. We are recording today's webinar, so we'll get that out to you in the next day or so. And if there are any questions during the webinar, please drop them into the Q&A section, and we'll answer them live at the end. Brandon and Alex, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, everybody.
Definitely thanks for
joining us. Happy to be here with y'all today, and I'm really pleased to introduce my compatriot over here, Alex Garcia, a system engineer over with Palo Alto Cortex. So he'll be chatting through what we're getting out of our various integrations that we have with Palo Alto Cortex today. A bit of background on me first off. I am the endpoints product manager here at Red Canary, also covering some other security domains too, like SIM and network. Security nerd by day and optical engineer by night. So in the past, I came from an NDR place where we were working on doing a lot of network tapping. So it's been really fun to learn how to turn that telemetry into something actionable here at Red Canary. And looking forward to our future together with Cortex as we continue to ingest more Cortex data and provide our managed service offering on top of it. Over to you, Alex.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Brandon. A little bit about myself. I've been at Palo Alto Networks for just a little over 4 years. I hit the 4-year mark in November. It's been an awesome experience. I am the Cortex SE, like Brandon mentioned, and I support specifically our Cortex XMDR specialized partners, right? So Red Canary is one of those partners that has gone through the technical training, building our, the relationships from the business and from the technical perspective, interacting with our engineering folks, right? So our product teams. So yeah, I kind of work with both the partner and our product engineering team, right, to make that collaboration happen. And I love working with the firewalls. I've been a network security engineer for quite some time. I don't know, maybe for the last 15 years or so, I've been working with firewalls. So I love those little blue boxes. I do spend a lot of time outside, right, in the outdoors. So I'm a little bit of an outdoorsman, I think. And I am a veteran of the United States Air Force, and I do live in Houston, Texas. So that's a little bit about me. Good to meet everyone.
And somehow managed to spend, on top of doing all of your daily job, but also spend like a month and a half in Japan every week, or every year, which I'm also
every
jealous
year,
of.
once a year. Yeah. So I do travel to Japan quite a bit.
That's awesome. All right, jumping into our integration, jumping into our agenda for the day. We'll first be covering a little bit about what Palo Alto Cortex is. So intro to that, as well as what the XDR solution on top of that is, and kind of dive into the data that we're getting out of Cortex next. So that'll be how we go and pull that information from Cortex into Red Canary's platform. Talk a little bit about the value of that, both on the telemetry side as well as the alerting side. So Cortex has some IOCs and BIOCs that really help out in Red Canary's overall remit to make sure that we're providing a really good security coverage there. And then we'll be talking about how that data and alerts end up being correlated with all of the other products that Red Canary covers in your IT environment. Kind of wrapping up that with a discussion of how our kind of SOAR-like platform really helps out with executing automated actions from Palo Alto Cortex's SOAR as well. And then at the end, we'll be demoing it all for you. Please feel free to drop Q&A questions in the chat throughout, and let's kick it off with what is Cortex?
Awesome. Thank you. So let's see, do I have the controls to the slides? No, I don't. Can you jump into the next section for me? So, okay, thank you, Brandon. So first of all, I wanted to start this session with the Palo Alto section anyway, with this slide. I wanted to make you guys aware for the longest, Palo Alto Networks has been known as the firewall vendor, the number one firewall out there with the next generation technology and whatnot. But a couple of years back, I want to say back in early 2019, Palo Alto Networks broke up into what we call speedboats internally, right? So think of these as business units. Palo Alto Networks is not only in the firewall business anymore, but we have other speedboats where we focus on things like cloud security, where we're doing compliance monitoring of workloads and things like that, protecting those assets in the cloud. We just launched our newer speedboat, Unit 42, which focuses on threat intelligence and advisory services, right? So it's the consultative side of Palo Alto Networks. And then I saved the best for last, Cortex XDR, or sorry, Cortex, the Cortex speedboat. Cortex focuses on everything security operations related, right? So we're tasked to bring to light these new methods, new technologies to work in our security operations center. The things that we have been doing for the last 15 years or so, they're not working anymore, right? The adversaries have gotten quite a bit advanced. They're using a lot of machine learning, a lot of AI, and then you're seeing malware as a commodity, right? So how do we address these things? This is kind of what we're tasked at Cortex, to address these types of issues with some of the best technology out in the industry. That's focusing around automation and AI, right? If the bad guys are using it, why are we not doing it as responders and defenders? So that's kind of at a high level what Palo Alto Networks is, right? So next, there we go. Thanks. I got the button there. Appreciate it. So what is Cortex, right? So I mentioned those speedboats, but zooming into Cortex. Cortex is the speedboat where we have the products in this specific portfolio. The products are Cortex XDR, which is our EDR plus additional features, which turn the product into this extended detection and response platform. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but actually Palo Alto Networks was the vendor, the company that coined the term XDR, right? We've been focusing on EDR, and some of the smarter people in the company came to the conclusion that endpoint data is not the only thing that we need, right? We need more data. We need data from across the various security tools to get real insights into what's happening from the adversary's perspective, and then as well as powering our machine learning algorithms, right? The more data we have, the higher the efficacy of those detections and alerts, right? And the reduction of false positives, which is a big one, a big thing that we want to bring, right? We don't want you to looking at things that really don't matter. So that's Cortex XDR in a nutshell. Cortex XOR is another product that we cover under the Cortex umbrella. Cortex XOR is our automation and orchestration platform focusing on security use cases. But if you guys know how these tools work, they're all API driven, so the use cases are unlimited, right? I like to think, our imagination, our creativity is kind of what prevents us from taking the platform to its full potential. So there's some really cool stuff in there. Cortex Expanse is another product that we cover under Cortex. This is our attack surface management platform, right? Giving us the visibility from the adversary's perspective, and from looking at the enterprise from the outside, looking inwards, right? What is it that's exposed to the internet? What are the entry points, the potential entry points, and giving you that insight into that. And with these three tools, going again to what we're trying to do at Cortex, we're trying to rewire security operations, flipping things around, right? We at Palo Alto Networks are known for disrupting the industry, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to disrupt the way we're doing security operations and bring it to the 21st century. With all of these products, you see down here at the bottom, managed security services. That's sort of what we're trying to facilitate. It's gotten to a point, especially with some of the things that you're seeing in Cortex XDR, that legacy endpoint protection platforms are not doing the job. We need a lot more data. We need to have the expertise to read that data and make sense of it, right? How do these operating systems work? What does the architecture look like? Why is it behaving in certain ways, right? So you got to have some kind of background. Those skill sets are necessary, right? And from a managed security perspective, partners like Red Canary, that's what they bring to the table. They're able to, like I said, they went through the Palo Alto Networks enablement content, to the boot camps and all that stuff, the certifications. So they've got the expertise to manage and read that data. Cortex XDR, zooming into the product that we're talking about today. What is it? It is a SaaS application, sits in the cloud. relies heavily on the Cortex data lake, right? We need a place to store data that's coming in from the endpoint, from the network, from the cloud, from our identity products. All of that data is stored in the data lake, where things like stitching and correlation happen, right? So something that I will show you in the demo is what we call stitching within Cortex XDR, and that's really easy to describe. It's taking endpoint data, network data, cloud, these sources, and creating one log item from that activity rather than having, in this case, four different sets of logs. Yeah, we'll still have it in the telemetry. You can search it, you can work through that, but it's nice and clean when we show one log entry of all of the activity that was seen across multiple products. And then also in machine learning, that's known as data pre-processing, right? So not only do we do that stuff to kind of show it nice and clean, but then we use it to feed into our algorithms, and that's kind of how they learn the behavior of the network, of the endpoints, of the processes, and of the enterprise, right? So we just released not too long ago a global analytics engine that it's able to tell, okay, hey, this enterprise is behaving like a healthcare entity or a financial entity or what have you, right? So that when there are deviations of that behavior, we start triggering these global alerts. So it's kind of cool. Cortex XDR. One of the big things with the product is that you can do you can collapse your security tools, right? So if you look at the features within Cortex XDR, it is first and foremost an endpoint protection platform, right? So Palo Alto Networks is our mantra here is prevent everything that we know is bad, and those things that we don't know what they are, turn them into known so we can take the necessary action. And this is what EPP is doing. We do have a anti-malware protection agent, or not agent, but a module. And we also have an exploit prevention module that's part of the Cortex XDR platform. All of our customers, we have four different subscriptions or license types, but everything has the protections and preventions there, so that you can configure them accordingly. We also leverage our Wildfire cloud sandbox, right, to turn those unknowns into knowns. So that's kind of neat, because that Wildfire service is crowdsourced from our network, the firewalls, and from every other Cortex XDR customer. We're feeding that data into the Wildfire cloud. It is also a user behavioral analytics platform, right? So we're doing a lot of really cool things with identity awareness. We're consuming metadata from Active Directory, and yeah, the analytics engines there have been engineered for that use case there, UEBAs. It is an EDR platform, right? So a lot of that endpoint telemetry, a lot of that visibility gets collected and forwarded to Cortex in the cloud. Starts in the cloud in Cortex Data Lake, and then it gets fed into the Cortex XDR application. That's where the engines, the analytics, and all that stuff take place. One of the things that I'd like to highlight here for the EDR component is I think we're the only one vendor that has the telemetry that we're collecting is just insane. It is so much data that we're collecting, and it is something that has attracted Red Canary to form this partnership. The level of data that we're seeing is something that they're going to definitely leverage for their own IP, right? Their own detections, their own analytics, on top of what Cortex is already providing. So that's going to be really nice to see in production environments. The platform is also a network analytics tools and an NTA platform and the NDR, right? So with the firewalls, with us being the firewall vendor and the endpoint vendor, it's really easy for us to integrate our firewalls into Cortex XDR for that stitching that I was talking about, for that NDR type of activities. We also have the analytics engines that perform detections on the network traffic, right? So we can do some really cool reporting on that and some detections when the Cortex XDR agent is not on endpoints, right? So think about IoT type devices. You want to know how those things are doing, what are they doing, and when they deviate from their established baseline, you want to get those alerts. Cortex XDR also has cloud capabilities, right? Protection, visibility. There's a new feature that was introduced not too long ago to give us the ability to inventory our cloud environments. There's some licensing there that has to go into place, but once that's there, you don't have to have an XDR agent deployed to be able to see that, right? We'll consume the logs from your cloud service provider and start to build an inventory to give you that visibility of what type of assets you have in the cloud. So some really fun stuff there. At a high level, some of the components within the platform, right? I talked about the various components, how we can collapse the security stacks that we're working with. But from the endpoint prevention perspective, you have some of the legacy type of features, right? It is a next generation antivirus, the anti-malware component, the exploit prevention, but it takes the security hygiene of the endpoint a little bit deeper, right? By being able to manage the host firewall, disk encryption policy, device control. And then from the AI-driven perspective, the analytics, I've been talking a lot about that. But Brandon also mentioned IOCs and BIOCs, right? So Palo Alto Networks, our threat research team for Cortex, they provide about 400 BIOCs. And what are these BIOCs that we keep mentioning? These are behavioral indicators of compromise, right? So we build these queries against the telemetry data that's being collected, and they will run periodically. Actually, whenever there's data that's being uploaded into the cloud, these BIOCs will run. If there's a detection, you will see that in the console. These BIOCs are detections only, right? They're used for hunting, for threat hunting, and for visibility detection type of activities there. Correlations is similar to BIOCs. BIOCs pertain to Palo Alto Networks technology, so the firewalls and the endpoint, but correlations are something similar that can be performed against third-party data. So I don't know if you throw in another security network security appliances logs into Cortex XDR, we would want to run a correlation. The correlations use our XQL query language, which is part of our advanced threat hunting capabilities, right? To find that data. Rogue device management, it does scan the network looking for devices that don't have the Cortex XDR agent and bring that to light as well. And then our vulnerability assessment, right? With our host insights, you not only can inventory the things that are running on the endpoint, like operating systems, which is an easy one, but application inventory, looking for things that could be used to establish persistence with inventory or services, drivers, startups. And then vulnerability assessment is part of that thing there. Incident management, right? So it's got Cortex XDR does have an incident management section as part of the console, right? Where we are bringing in all of the alerts. And I talked about stitching, but we also do alert grouping. And so with Cortex XDR, the machine learning algorithms are looking at the alerts as they're coming in, and they're determining based on behavior and some other things, whether these alerts are all tied to the same activity. If they are, Cortex will bundle them up and present them to the analyst in what we call the incident. So that's part of that incident management. That's gonna, once we start diving into the alerts, it's gonna give us some insights into the root cause of that incident, of those activities. And then from a remediation perspective, the live terminal is a pretty awesome tool that has some powerful capabilities, especially for responders, right? Where a lot of times we see custom Python scripts that are built for remediation or response actions. Well, the Cortex XDR agent has a built-in Python interpreter that can be leveraged during a live terminal session. So that's kind of cool. The XQL query language I mentioned, that's part of our advanced threat hunting capabilities. It is part of the platform, the XDR Pro endpoint and Pro per terabyte, that you can leverage that, query your data sets and whatnot, right? So think of that sort of like a SIM type of use case, right? So they'll have integrated threat intel that can be tied to it, right? It requires a subscription to either autofocus or virus total, but you can get some of that data into the platform from there. We do have a threat hunting service that we can we can establish, right? Customers can subscribe to that. You can subscribe to the to the MDR service, and on top of the MDR service, you can have this managed threat hunting service. So think of this as a second set of eyes looking through your data. And then from the response capabilities, search and destroy. Cortex does have that capability to go across. You tell it, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Go across the entire enterprise or go across a select number of endpoints, and then goes out and looks for that data. And then if you want to destroy those files, you certainly can. Script execution, file blocking, quarantine and removal, and device isolation is part of sort of the endpoint protection. And it integrates really easily with our SOAR platform, right? Our SOAR platform is agnostic, vendor agnostic, but we do spend a little bit more efforts in building integrations and even playbooks and automations for Cortex XDR. But yeah, that's Cortex Cortex XDR in a nutshell. I know I shared a lot, but yeah, this product is pretty exciting to me. I could spend all day talking about it.
Definitely, Alex. Speaking of, someone asked in the chat about mobile device support. I believe that's something that Cortex covers as of 3.5, right?
Correct. We just launched the Apple or iOS agent. We do have a for Android. We do have an agent for Android, but it's only on the protection side. We're not doing any, and the same thing for iOS. We're not doing any telemetry or data collection. It's more on the protection side.
Yeah. So, and I'll kind of cues us up well for this distinction here on the ingest side for Red Canary. So, like Alex was mentioning, there's a big capability to create really useful high fidelity endpoint telemetry out of Cortex, as well as like he was talking about, the IOCs and BIOC indicators that we get on the alert side. Red Canary is very fortunate to be able to ingest both of those. On the telemetry side, we utilize a Cortex license called Event Forwarding EP, and that is applied per endpoint, and you're able to then go and collect that really rich telemetry data and forward it from the GCP data lake and that Cortex runs into Red Canaries. We're able to take that telemetry in and put it in front of our analytics to enhance what we're seeing there on the Cortex side. We also then get to leverage all of Cortex's IOCs and BIOCs too, that cover everything that Alex was talking about here. So we'll ingest both of those and be able to use that combined perspective to really provide a great service on top of all of this. So we're able to take those IOCs, correlate them in with the endpoint telemetry data that we're getting to be able to kind of get a full context in front of our analysts. Really helps out on making sure that we have some great coverage there. So overall, I wanted to just talk to this piece on Red Canary side. So we're able to ingest those alerts from network sources, from endpoint sources, cloud sources, third-party data as well. Super interesting to be able to bring Red Canary's MDR service across all of that. We're also looking at some great container support inside of this and the cloud era. So with Cortex XDR applies to GKE sources as well as AWS and Azure. So able to run those container level support, provide some great telemetry off of the cloud data too. One of the most exciting things that I like about Cortex as well is that they're able to staple in a lot of third-party data on top of this as well. So you can push out individual analytics onto the Cortex agent that says, hey, I want to collect this other third-party data. So Windows Event Collection would be a good source there, and feed all of that up and through into Red Canary as well. Before we get too far into some of the Cortex discussion, I did want to take a second and cover a little bit of what operationalizing all of this looks like inside of Red Canary. So I'm describing our MDR service for a moment. So beginning with the collection side, we really start off with collecting security telemetry as well as alerts from all of the security tools that we cover on the IT space. So we make a distinction between what happens, the telemetry, and then the alerts, which is kind of what others think is happening. These connections all end up feeding into our detections and investigations, combining our behavioral analytics with correlation and enhancement of and enrichment of that underlying alerting data that flows in front of our threat intel feeds that we establish, our expert humans, and are written up to become confirmed threats on top of combined timelines, really showing each and every piece of data that combines to show that full story of what happened, why it matters, and then what's next too. So responding to this, like Alex has been talking about with Cortex XDR, is really flexible. Inside of Red Canary, what we're able to do is utilize our automated playbooks, have our incident handlers jump in to advise you on next steps, and even have them take action if you'd like to with an upcoming service that we're offering on top of Cortex for our active remediation. So we try to keep all of the service is in this category, the SOAR category, really flexible and personalizable. So you can go in and adjust these automated playbooks to be exactly what you would want to happen on the response side. Like we were talking about on the active side as well, we keep a record of what we're doing on that endpoint as well as why. So you're able to really interrogate exactly what happened in some of these after-hour situations. Next up, I want to talk about some of the key value props that we get here. So Red Canary prides ourselves in really providing a lot of this detection analytics. We spent the last 7 or 8 years really building up a telemetry analysis from lots of other endpoint products. We're really excited to be able to expand that same coverage out to Cortex today. What we've done here is across each of the EDRs that Red Canary goes and integrates with, we standardize all of the endpoint telemetry data versus our models that we use to write these detections to. The cool part about this is that it means that we're able to go and ingest all of this Cortex telemetry and immediately apply that to all 3,000 some odd analytics that we already have that we've been spending so much time building. Like Alex was mentioning too, Cortex has a really rich data set, so we're able to provide that complete coverage across all of these analytics that we have developed and spent a lot of time on. So it's able to really provide some great coverage there. What we also do in order to kind of staple this on top of all of this is, like we were talking about with the raw endpoint telemetry, we're excited to be some of the first people to integrate that with Cortex as they've really mature product offering. Just recently have been able to export all of that telemetry to partners like Red Canary. So we're one of the first to be able to pick that up and excited to apply all of this here. On the telemetry usage side, we also then go and correlate onto the Cortex provided IOCs and BIOCs. So 300 or 400 some analytics on the Cortex side, as well as the ML based IOCs too. Red Canary pulls in all of that data and correlates it in with the telemetry that we have in order to really let our CERT team feel comfortable investigating those IOCs. Helps to buy down some of the alert fatigue, as well as start taking actions and extend your SOC into Red Canary's offering too. Next up on the roadmap for us, I wanted to talk a little bit about our active remediation service. So Cortex has some really great live response capabilities, both on an individual endpoint to be able to go in and run shell commands, as well as being able to script that across multiple with their console. So it really helps us out when we're coming in to build up this active remediation service where our incident handlers then take one step further. So we're able to use all of the out-of-the-box SOAR integrations for endpoint isolation, some ban hashing and such on top of Cortex. We take that one step further with this service to say, hey, cool, let's go and jump into the platforms itself utilizing these remote terminal commands. Works out really greatly, and we're excited to be offering that coming up this next month.
And Brandon, we have a question around a true positive detection. The question the user's asking, does Red Canary provide a custom XQL detection to continue an investigation if something is detected, right?
Yeah, that's a really cool one. What we end up doing there is we use Cortex's XQL query capability to do some retro hunt capabilities. So what we'll do there is when we have a new detection that we've found in any part of our Red Canary's customer base, we'll go back through and run queries on all of that data that's sitting inside of Cortex's data lake to say, hey, do we see this happening anywhere else? Do we see this on other customers too? So really great abilities for us to go and retro hunt for these kind of incidents across our customer base. On the continuing investigation side, that is definitely something that is accessible to our customers. What we end up doing is Cortex has a bi-directional authorization for MSSPs to be able to jump into the Cortex consoles themselves. That would be the same facilities that we use to provide this kind of active remediation service. So you'll both be able to go into the Red Canary portal, integrate on the telemetry side to say forward this data from GCP into Red Canary, add in some alert keys in order for us to pull the alert data directly. And then as that final step, if you're interested in us taking one step further and running some of those KQL queries on the Cortex console themselves, we can set up an authorization to allow us to jump into Cortex, your Cortex instance in particular. If there's any other questions, I think that brings us to our demo portion. Ooh, we got another one. Telemetry retention limits for retro hunts. So that's mostly, I think, a question for Alex.
You're right. So the telemetry retention, Cortex XDR comes with 30 days worth of retention. And so this is the retention that Red Canary is going to work with. Now there are some additional retention days, months that you can purchase, right? We have hot storage available. We have cold storage. Cold storage is not really meant for threat hunts, is more for a compliance type use case. If you need to pull that data, you can pull it, right? But yeah, you can definitely extend the retention, the default retention from 30 days to whatever it is that you need.
And that's about the time frame that Red Canary usually utilizes when it comes to retro hunts. We find that data past that sometimes gets a little stale. So really focusing on the last month lets us cut down the amount of false positives that we end up generating from some of this too. Makes it sure it's nice and actionable. I'm going to stop share for a second here and pass it over to Alex to start us off in the Cortex platform.
All righty, thank you. Let me go ahead and get my screen going. So I've got an incident popped open here. So like I said, it is a SaaS platform, right? So when you jump into the platform, you're going to land in the dashboards. The dashboards are really cool. You can build these. So there are some default dashboards that come with the platform, and those unfortunately you cannot modify. But they're meant for different personas, the SOC manager, maybe analyst, maybe the CIO kind of thing. But the one that I want to show you here is this threat hunting dashboard. This dashboard was built from SQL queries. So we keep mentioning SQL, right? So SQL is our query language that's going across the data sets. Some really cool things that you can do, just like you can with other SIMS databases. You can merge that data or join the data, I should say. And things like that, right? So if you know what you're looking for, you can build these dashboards and come here. Like if I was working in a SOC today, I would make this my default dashboard, right? So when I log into the platform, I can kind of tell where do I need to focus my efforts, right? So this place in my incident management section is another place that I would go to. If I hover over, you can see here that it's pulling from an SQL query, and I can kind of show you what that looks like. This is it right here, right? I can see the data that we're going to pull from this query because it's running, but SQL allows us to do other things like building the graph, right? So that's what you're seeing in that dashboard, building of that graph. If you're working on multiple data sets, we try to make it easy for you to learn the SQL query language. There's a schema for every data set. So it doesn't matter what this is. If I change it to like, for example, let's see, Cisco raw logs. Okay, so you see the data set change, right? So we're trying to make it a little bit easier for us to learn, including myself. There's an SQL helper there, kind of show you how to use the different attributes. A query library, right? So just like those BIOCs, Palo Alto Networks will provide these queries to you. There's not a lot. I think maybe there's about 100 default queries that come with every instance of Cortex XDR, and then you can take these and modify them, right? We'll show you what this looks like. You can come and customize them. You can use them in the query builder really easily, and then tweak them, save them as your own. So that's kind of cool. But something that I want to show you here real quick. The level of visibility in the cloud, for example, if you take a look at this query, we are looking at Amazon AWS, and specifically, this is looking for a signature of an operating system. There it is. There's a AMI number. And so what we're doing here is every time that we see this signature spin up in the cloud, we want to know. We want to know because that signature is tied to a Kali Linux distro, right? So you can kind of get the idea of the kind of things you can do. This is cloud, endpoint, and then firewall, right? So yeah, you can build a query, you know, what you're looking for, you can drop it into something like this. So that's kind of cool. Incidents or incident management. So I've got an incident up here. At first, it looks a little bit busy, right? But once you start to understand what the platform is trying to show you, all you need to do is kind of glance at this, and you have an idea of what's happening. So just really quickly, trying to illustrate here that we have a total of 96 alerts and their severity levels, right? The sources of those alerts, so firewall, the XDR agent, BIOCs, analytics, and then XDR analytics, right? So our network type of analytics engines there. The number of endpoints and users and any malware hits that were found via wildfire. So I can click on that and can get a quick copy of the hash value. I can look at my users. There's one specific that I'm interested. I can click on it, and now we're looking at the UEBA component of XDR, right? One of the modules, anyway, of the UEBA component gives us a risk score for that user based on their authentication and behavior, right? So here's where the user was observed in other incidents or alerts. Here's some more information about their authentication. And then to the question earlier about retention, we can go back 7, 14, or 30 days. 30 days because that's, you know, as far as the telemetry will let us go. Jumping back into the console, the incident management section here. Endpoints, some really cool stuff that you can do from here directly, right? So this is letting me know that that endpoint is online, and if I click on it, here's a pop-up tab, right? We don't have to leave this console, right? And there's some really valuable information that you can get really quickly to make a quick decision on whether you need to dive into this a little bit deeper. Group names, tags, agent version, network information, and then policy that's protecting that endpoint. This is the policy from the EPP side of things, the endpoint protection platform. You can actually view it here, right? So if there's something that was missed, you can look at the malware protection. Okay, well, maybe there's a misconfiguration, and then you can jump in and tweak that, right? Exploit protection, there it is. And then there are restrictions and exceptions. So this would be that section where you can manage that. Also, you can come into the endpoint policy management and look at some of those profiles and the policy from this section here as well, right? So you can get to anything really that you want to pivot into from the various areas within the platform. We do have this quick launcher that you can type in an IP address, for example. And it recognizes what this thing is, right? What this string is, and it will, okay, for an IP address, this is what you can do. You can open it up in what we call the 360-degree view. We can see any network connections that were established, incoming or outgoing. We can search, yes, so this is all the search connections. Here, I'll pop it open here. So this is that 360-degree view where we can flip these options, and whatever it is that we're looking for, incoming, outgoing, source countries, IPs, depending on what we select here, app IDs, right? This is part of our IP that we use on our firewalls. We get to see some of that now on the endpoint side, and then any information from the threat intel perspective that we have on that IP. So really
So Alex,
cool.
Are those views all driven off of the endpoint telemetry, or do you also incorporate the firewall telemetry in there too?
So that's a good question. We can incorporate it with the firewall telemetry. So I have an incident here. Let me show this real quick, where I talked about alert grouping, and that's what we're going to see here. This is the various alerts. It could be coming from multiple machines. So that's PC1, PC2, AWS IT10. So this is the machine learning said, hey, all of this activity, all of these alerts, they're tied to that same incident, and it called it ID 1366 as the incident name. and we can give it this a name, right? So this is what this scenario is depicting: the spear phishing with Quasar database exfiltration. I don't have the permissions to show you the tweaking of the names, but you know, renaming things is really easy. But yeah, as you can see here, the alert sources coming from the various things that we mentioned here, right? That's why they show up here, because they're listed in here. But if we take a look at the telemetry, let's go and jump into a new tab. Actually got it open over here somewhere. There it is. So this is what that would look like. This is going to take a little bit to load. It's still loading. So I've kind of prepared it here. So this is the causality view, the causality chain view. So everything that is taking place, whether it's an alert or not, it's gonna be shown here, right? If it's part of that incident. And so what I wanted to show you here is that when we detonated that Quasar file, all of these processes started to take place, right? They started running, but then the firewall also saw a network connection from this specific service, and is denoted in the picture here. But if we take a look at the network connections tab down here, this is where all the telemetry resides. Yeah, so this is all of that activity from the endpoint and from the firewall. So we scroll to the right, you can see, but by the type of data, you can start to think, okay, well, yeah, this is endpoint data, right? So this is some of the source process paths, the commands, like this is the things that the endpoint's going to see, not the network. But as we keep going to the right, now we're starting to see app ID. App ID again is our firewall. Here's the firewall serial number that saw that activity, the firewall rule that allowed that traffic to flow through, the firewall vendor, and then the stitching. Remember stitching, what I was talking about? So this is letting me know that this specific log item is coming from both the combination of XDR agent and network firewall data together, stitched together. So that's really neat. I think we're the only vendor out there that's able to tie these things together natively within the product, right? Because again, we own the firewall IP, we own the endpoint ID. It's really easy for our product teams to work together to build these integrations. So yeah, so that's kind of what I want to show you there. Our detection rules, our legacy IOCs, our BIOCs. Let's go ahead and kind of show this a little bit so you can get an idea what that looks like. So this is a BIOC that's being that was created. You can see who is the provider. So Palo Alto Networks, like I told you guys, close to 400 of these BIOCs are provided from our threat research team, plus what Red Canary is going to be adding to this. And yeah, and so these are queries against that telemetry data, those data sets. These do work retroactively. So if we find behavior in the environment and we want to explore that a little bit further, you can create a BIOC and it will go back in time, right? Those 30 days or whatever it is you have for retention when it's hot storage, it will go back and look through that. Correlations use that query language. So here's that Kali image deployment that I was showing you. So I can't show you how to create that. I don't have the, oh, maybe I do. Let's see. Yep, there we go. So yeah, so we create a title, we build a query for the search, set the times we want it to run, and then there's some other cool things that you can do. You can build a MITRE heat map, and then for the alert grouping, remember I said that's a ML engine that's running, learning the patterns and the behaviors. So these are some of the things that you're going to want to fill out so that alert grouping is pretty tight with those correlations, and grouping them with other alerts and whatnot that's being created in the platform. Assets, this is sort of like our section where we would look for things that are part of our host insights, right? Extending that visibility into the endpoint from going a little bit beyond with our telemetry data collection from other EDR products and even ours, right? So this is an additional add-on license that's going to give us the inventory on these types of components here, and then our vulnerability assessment for those customers that are really tight with their vulnerability management program. You can export that data, right, and share it with your systems teams or whoever's managing or maintaining those updates, right? You can flip them from CVEs to endpoints, and just a different way to slice and dice the data. So that's kind of a cool feature. Cloud
Yeah, definitely.
inventory.
We had a
Cloud
couple
inventory.
questions if you don't mind
Oh,
before you go too far,
sure,
Alex.
sure, sure. Let me
The
take a quick
first
look.
one, yeah, I think the first one is really cool, to a chance to talk about how Cortex goes and native blocks policy as well. So when you see malware detonations, the example you were showing obviously didn't have that enabled, but that's something that Cortex does as well, correct?
Correct. So yeah, so something that I failed to mention is the things that you're seeing in this demo environment, we had to disable the blocking capabilities. Otherwise, we would just have one alert that said, hey, we detected malware and we blocked it. Right. So we wouldn't see the pretty causality chain and didn't see any of that telemetry data. But you're correct. Again, by default, Palo Alto Networks, we prevent everything that we know is bad. And so when you first deploy XDR, it does come with a default prevention policy. It focuses so much on the prevention policy that you actually have to turn on the telemetry collection if you want to have that capability. So let me jump into that real quick. And yeah, so here's my, where's my default policy? There it is right there. You see, so now it's down at the very bottom. We can assign policy to endpoints, groups of endpoints that we can create either statically or dynamically within the XDR console, or we can use Active Directory by deploying this little thing that we call Cloud Identity Engine. It consumes metadata from Active Directory infrastructure, and then we can use some of that to assign policy, right? So yeah, so that's on the prevention side. And then Jamie's asking, is that only with the Palo firewall? Can it be done with other firewalls as well? Actually, there is a, here, let me share this with you real quick and I'll paste it in the chat window. Cortex XDR data. Okay, there we go. External data sources. So, okay, so this is a very important document from my perspective anyway. I always reference this. These are some of the vendors. Well, these are all the vendors that we natively ingest data with our I'm going to call them our competitors firewalls. Yeah, we can ingest their data, and we can also do analytics, network traffic analytics against that data, and we can stitch that data with Cortex XDR agent data. So the answer is yes. But look through this data. This data breaks down the capabilities by columns. Raw data visibility is telling us that we can slice and dice that data using the SQL query language. Normalization of data, we can ingest it, and we can that stitching, we call it network stories, right? So it'll tell you here if we can do that or not with the log type in the vendor. And then Cortex XDR visibility, meaning will Cortex give you an alert for that product, whether it's an analytics alert, an IOC, you see that there. And not all data is equal, right? It's not created equal. So if you take a look at Azure, for example, we don't do analytics on that because the data is not rich enough for our analytics engines to learn. And then vendor alert visibility. Can we do alerts? So like, for example, Cisco ASA, if Cisco ASA triggers, oh, I'm sorry, Fortinet triggers an alert for, I don't know, from their anti-spyware module, we would see that in Cortex XDR as it's an alert, just like you would see it on the Fortinet. So let me paste that in the chat, and then you guys can look through that at your leisure. And yeah, so I think I'm going to turn it back over to Brandon because I'm eating up all the time here. So thank you, guys.
All good. Grab screen share here for a second. So I'm going to pick up where Red Canary picks up. So this is inside of our my version of the Cortex XDR platform. So what we'll end up doing is, and the way that we integrate here is we can jump into configuration, and then we're able to grab this event forwarding section inside of here. So what this lets us do is forward raw telemetry from the endpoints. So we'll enable this endpoint event forwarding, take this path and credential package and go drop it over into Red Canary. So this is our configuration for Cortex XDR. You'll be able to set this up inside of your Red Canary portal, drop in the tenant URLs, API URLs, as well as the keys for the API side. This is what lets us take the SOAR response actions as well as ingest alerts. And then on the telemetry side, this is where you would grab those GCP path as well as the token package that we use from the screen. Pretty easy on the configuration side. And then this is what ends up driving the Red Canary platform, like you're probably mostly familiar with on the threat side, as well as endpoints monitored and activity feeds. So we can jump into any one of these as far as looking into the types of threats that we're able to generate from Cortex telemetry. So for instance, this one is driven off of some process executions. Able to follow that through and throw that in front of our analysts to publish some confirmed threats on top of these. Able to scroll through this combined timeline of utilizing really any IT product that Red Canary supports to inform these threats. We can see the same kind of endpoint page. So this will pull all of the endpoint data that we're able to get off of their off of the Cortex information. Throw that all up into Red Canary as well, so we can check out one of these that's running in our lab environment. This one's not sending telemetry currently, but it's connected up into our Cortex instance as far as some test vehicles. Here's where we can isolate it, decommission the endpoint if necessary, able to get some good coverage on top of it. We also have our automation section that is layered on top of all of this as well. So you're able to take actions on these endpoints when certain types of threats are published. So if we're having a threat published, for instance, on some days of the weeks where your SOC isn't going to be active, we can take some expedited actions as far as isolating that endpoint, doing some proactive alerting, whatever is really necessary in order to get us back up and running. Let's see, anything going on? Okay. It looks like we just have the poll left over, so I will go ahead and jump back over into some of our top level pieces here. So we see a bunch of threats published here. This is off of our lab data that we've been testing Cortex out for the last few months. So happy to announce that it is now ready for production side and all ready for you to use it too. And switch back over to my screen share here. There we go. All right, let's see what's going on in webinar land. Okay, cool. Alex has launched the poll for us. Sorry, Adam has launched the poll for us. So all set there. Please answer the question as far as any next steps that you want to take. And let's see, we have one last question coming in. Azure data being low fidelity for ML analytics about environment and identity data from AWS. Oh, it looks like Alex already covered it.
Yeah, so I'll answer it here on the mic. So that specifically, those log types that I was mentioning are network logs from Azure, and they're specifically the event hub logs, the flow logs. So yeah, so that's why I shared that document there, right? You can look through those because like Azure Network Watcher, the flow logs there, we can take those and do analytics against. We do have here, I'll show you real quick. Sorry, Brandon, I'm gonna steal the screen again. Here, let me show you. We do have integrations, custom, sorry, which one is it here? This one, collection integrations. So these are some of the products, or these are the products you're gonna see in this document, right? So we do have those integrations built. All you gotta do is, and I can't show you the configuration piece there, but all you got to do is build those API connections. Sometimes, 2, 3 line items that you got to fill out, and then you start ingesting those logs. This does require the Cortex XDR Pro per terabyte license, and it would have to be sized to make sure that we're allocating enough resources both in the cloud and storage. But yeah, it's pretty easy to get through a sizing exercise. So again, yeah, reference that document that I shared if you want to learn more about what vendors and what log types we can do analytics with, and what we, what can we do with that data. So anyway, back to you, Brandon.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank everyone for joining today. It looks like we don't have any more questions, so I think we're going to go ahead and drop off. Really appreciate the time, and thank you so much for joining me, Alex.
Yeah, thank
Hope
you.
to
Thanks
chat soon.
for the invite. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.